What's up, guys? This is Mike Casu, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. This week, I interview Jami Tikkanen. He is the owner and founder of The Training Plan, as well as the longtime coach of Annie Thorisdottir. For those of you who don't know Jami already, he is an absolutely phenomenal guy and one of the best coaches in any sport that I've ever met. This show is just full of wisdom from very technical things in our sport, as well as his coaching philosophy and philosophy in general as a human. Tons of good stuff. I know you're going to enjoy it. Before we get started, I'm doing a little experiment here. I'm going to invite any of you that are interested to call into a voicemail that I have set up and leave some questions. So then I'm going to play back your question on the podcast, and I'm either going to answer the question myself or I'm going to get one of my guests to help me answer those questions. If you're interested, the number is 801-449-0503. That's 801-449-0503. If you're not already subscribed to our newsletter, you can do so by going to brutestrengthtraining.com. That's where we're going to keep you up to date with all of the new video content that we have coming out, as well as some free ebooks that we're putting out during the holiday season. So enjoy the show. What's up, guys? This is Mike Casu, and this is the Brute Strength Podcast. I'm here with Jami Tikkanen. Did I do okay there?
That was great.
Dude, I know you're a super busy guy. You're traveling the world right now. You're running a business. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Such a pleasure.
I'm experimenting with this new thing. Have you ever heard the Savage Lovecast by chance?
I haven't. No.
It's a psychologist who does like he's a behavioral psychologist, and he takes questions primarily on his podcast. People call in with a bunch of questions and he'll answer those. Like the whole thing is him answering those. So I'm going to experiment and see if my audience likes it. And I would love to get you to help me answer one. What do you think?
Okay.
So
yeah,
I had a guy call in from Canada. Let me play it for you.
Hey, my name is Jeff Kubik, calling from Alberta, Canada. I go to Most Physical Preparation. My question is, as a coach, do you have any systems or boundaries with your athletes in order to maintain a coach-athlete relationship and not blur the lines?
All right, Jeff, thanks for calling in, man. I'm actually going to get my friend Jami here to help me answer this question. Jami, what do you think of this?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is something that I've really kind of struggled with myself in the past. And, when I started coaching seriously, let's say in CrossFit, I started working with Annie in 2010. I was much more immature as a coach at the time. So I think what happened there is that we struck a really good relationship in terms of trust, which I think is really the foundation. But then when you work with someone for such a long time, I've been working with her for 6 years, you're going to get to know each other maybe sometimes too much as people, as much as you have that relationship between a coach and an athlete. And I definitely think that can sometimes get in the way of passing a message when you're trying to get the athlete to change something, or you want them to do something that's difficult. If you're too close, I think that relationship can easily create a little bit of friction, or it can create that kind of like, I'm not sure if I'm willing to do this, especially if you bring in something that you might have not known in the past. So you have this new way of thinking or new way of looking at things, and you're trying to bring it into an athlete relationship where you know each other really well. That can be more difficult than if you have a little bit more distant relationship, a little bit more maybe hierarchical relationship with them, where you have more authority over what they say rather than a collaboration. But I think that both can definitely be beneficial. And I think a lot of it comes down to understanding who the athlete is and what kind of relationship is going to serve you and serve them the best. So I don't think there's one right answer. I think you can be very close and very friendly, or you can be very distant and very kind of authoritative, and both can work really well. But I think it's, rather than saying this is the best thing, figure out who the athlete is, figure out how you can serve them the best, and then choose the style that's going to suit them, not just necessarily the one that's going to suit you.
I love that. And tactically speaking, is there anything that you've had to do, say with your relationship with Annie, where you find yourself becoming, as you put it, like maybe too close of friends, and you want to kind of gain a little bit of that authority back so that she'll buy into your program? Is there anything that you've, had to do to gain that back?
I think you just have to have, every now and then, you need to have that kind of check-in with the reality and have that conversation where you're like, hey, this actually really matters.
Right.
And rather than like, kind of like, okay, it's been all fun and games, but let's get serious for a moment kind of thing. And let's have that serious talk. Let's reset. And then you can go back. And I think that's really been beneficial. But you kind of have to have that oh shit moment and have that real conversation to be able to carry on with that relationship.
Right. With Brooke, I've been the same exact way. And Brooke and I actually competed together on a team in 2011. And so we were very close friends before we even entertained the idea of me coaching her. And so there's, several times in our relationship, I've had to deal with the same thing. And what I do is I'm like, hey, this is your coach talking. Like, you need to do this. This doesn't line up with your goals. This is how it needs to be. There's really, it is a fact. Like, and I know you don't like to hear that, but that's just how it is. And she's very receptive. And I've found, a lot of times I might like kind of beat around the bush with her, but when I'm straight up with her as a coach, she fucking loves it, right? She wants someone to come in with authority and confidence to guide her. And that's how all athletes are to a certain extent.
Yeah, I think if you get too scared of saying the things that you should be saying, or you should be saying, I think that's when the problems come into that coaching relationship. So as long as you don't worry more about the relationship than you worry about the athlete and the results that they're looking to get. Awesome.
Thank you, Jami. So let's start out here. You competed in 2009, and since then you've been, one of the very most long-standing elite coaches in this sport. To what things do you attribute your continued success, whether it be education, genetic intelligence, different mentors? What kind of things do you attribute to that continued success?
It's definitely the superior genetic makeup. No,
that's what I was thinking.
I think there's two things that really matter to me. I think one is consistency, to keep showing up. You do something for long enough, and you keep asking questions, and you kind of get good at it. Mm-hmm. I think that's really one. And then the other side of it is I'm just a hungry learner, whether it's being at school or whether it's learning, trying to be an autodidact in different areas of life. I think that's really something.
What was that? A what?
Self-learned. Try to be self-learned. I try to be self-learned, like whether it's at school, I try to be self-learned in these different things that matter in life, whether it's something to do with the business or training or just philosophy. I think I'm just hungry to learn. So that just kind of keeps me going. I think we still have more questions than we have answers. So there's still some work to do.
Right. Do you think that everybody is hungry to learn?
I'd say that I would hope that we live in a world where everybody is hungry to learn. I think that sometimes we are not hungry to learn because we don't trust that we can learn. Right. We've learned early on in our life maybe that we are not smart or that we can't learn, and then that creates a lot of difficulty for us down the line. But I think inherently human beings are curious, and I think if you can evoke that hunger in someone, they will be hungry to learn. But sometimes we've kind of forgotten that we can learn.
Right. It's that either that maybe that pre-programming, or maybe it was their style of education growing up that has them jaded. But I'm the same way. I think everyone inherently can get very, very fired up about something. And maybe they just haven't found that thing yet, or they haven't, like you said, they don't believe in their ability to grow and learn. Are you familiar with the book Mindset?
Yeah, Carol Dweck, right?
Yeah. Do you, in your communication with these hundreds or thousands of athletes that you're working with,
millions,
love it. Are you having those kinds of conversations with people? And if so, how are you doing that in a remote setting?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, Carol Dweck's work, absolutely. I think that Mindset is a book that every human being should read. Mm-hmm. The earlier, the better. And I think, early on in my work with athletes, I didn't necessarily yet have that knowledge. I hadn't necessarily read all the books that I have read now and had all the conversations. So when I started out, it was a lot about hard work, and it was a lot about the mechanics of things. And then as I grew as a coach and as a person, I think that's becoming a more and more important part of what I do. I think if you can instill the psychology of how and why to do things. And I think that the what becomes a little bit less important as long as you're doing approximately the right thing. So those conversations are the ones that I prefer to have with my athletes, and they're the conversations that I keep having on a daily basis.
I love that, man. Do you have any kind of system or process by which you do goal setting and stuff like that with athletes?
It's funny. I've definitely in the last 4 to 5 years, I've really tried to explore for myself as well, like all these different methods and means of setting goals. And I think there's value to those tactics. But what I've learned more is that it's just so important to decide what you want out of life and to create a clear vision for yourself. That really is the starting point, whether you look at neuroscience of resilience or whether you look at just kind of like everyday conversations. If you don't know what you want, it's very hard to get it. If you don't have a target, you're going to miss every single time. So my process really is, again, going back to that idea that the athlete goes first. It depends on what I think that the athlete already knows based on the conversations with them, and try to fit something into their way of thinking rather than kind of impose my own method. But I think it's absolutely the first step. Step one, decide what you want, create a clear vision for yourself that's going to pull you towards it. Not just something that's going to push you away from pain, but just something that's going to pull you towards something that's compelling to you.
Right.
That you have to do it. And I think that there's a million ways to do it, and it doesn't matter how you do it. You just need to get it done.
That's a great answer. What would you have to say about people setting, things like SMART goals? What my only gripe with that kind of thinking is that I think a lot of times people they grossly underestimate what they're capable of in a long period of time. And maybe you make a SMART goal for a 1 month, something 1 month down the line. But I think when people are really trying to think what they want out of life, I think they tend to sell themselves short. What do you think of that?
I think that the trouble is that people oftentimes try to create the plan to get the goal while they're setting the goal. They don't dissociate those two things. And I think if you try to solve the problem while trying to define the problem, I think you run into trouble, and you're just going to define the problem in the terms that you can understand and what you think is possible. So I say it's important to first decide what you want. So set the goal. Don't think about how you're going to accomplish the goal, especially with these long-term big goals. And then once you've defined the goal clearly, now it's time to start to figure out what's the plan to get there. But if you try to do both at the same time, I think you end up with small dreams.
I fucking love that. That's a great answer. So I know, you and I don't know each other well, but I'm very observant of how coaches treat their athletes, and then how their athletes talk about them in the community, whether it be in person, social media, etc. And what I've noticed is that a lot of your athletes, they talk about you helping them, and they use I've seen the word grow a lot. And then I assume that means you help them grow in kind of all areas of their life. And so if that's true, that's the kind of shit that really fires me up. I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's again, is that I think there's an evolution of like early. I'd say as a coach, I was lucky that the athlete that I worked with, Annie, is so talented and hardworking that we kind of got to accomplish a lot of great things early on as she won the CrossFit Games, which I feel like helped me grow immensely because I realized that it matters. But from a coach's perspective, also, it doesn't matter. What matters is the journey of the athlete and their growth as a human being. And just this sport is just a great opportunity and a framework for that growth. So I think that if I wouldn't have had that lesson kind of early on, I might be still on a very different path. Whereas now I think that really, if I can help athletes to be great people that have a bright future ahead of them and possibilities, I think that's more important than their success in the sport. But I think that the success in the sport comes as a consequence of that process.
Who have been some of your biggest influences as a leader? You talked earlier, I think it might have been before we started recording, about being confident in what you're teaching and showing up and being consistent. Where'd you learn that?
I think, I would say I attribute a lot to when I was younger, I did judo, and I was fortunate to have a very good coach who would actually set very clear boundaries to that relationship between a coach and an athlete. And me being a young athlete, I sometimes, had run-ins with him about various things. But I think him having a very disciplined approach and very principle-based approach to dealing with the athletes was very influential to me. And then I think later on now, learning from people that I might have not met too much in person, people like Jim Rohn he's been a great influence of mine. Tony Robbins, have been to a lot of his seminars, done a lot of the work, done his coaches training. I think these people have had a huge influence. But then, like people like Ray Dalio, I don't know if that name rings a bell to anyone. He's a hedge fund manager. He has some really good ideas, some principles for life and how to set goals and how to achieve what you want to have. And he's a multi-billionaire, so I think he's done a good job. I like to look outside the fields of sport. Because I think somebody out there already has all the answers to your questions. You just need to know how to look for them.
That is awesome. So moving on to a little more, technical stuff. I know that at the training plan, I know you work with Chad Vaughn as well as Nate Helming, and I'm not sure if you'll have any other quote unquote specialists. But I'm wondering, why did you bring these guys on, and what's the significance of what they bring to the overall program?
Yeah, I mean, our team is constantly kind of evolving. Currently, we're not working with Chad at the moment. We're doing some work still with Nate Helming, and we kind of have a team that's evolving. We're going to do some work now with Cameron Nicol from the rowing world, and I think the idea behind creating a team was really back in 2010. We were at 2010 CrossFit Games. I was there with Annie and helping out Mikko and some of the other athletes. And then 2011, I met with Carl Pauli at the Games 2010. And then 2011, I asked if he was interested to work with me, with Annie, and then contacted Mike Bergener for Annie to travel there to do some work with him. And I think early on, I kind of realized, and looking at other sports, is that you can't be an expert in everything, and you need a team. And if you want to really help the athletes to get to where they want to go, you want to find the right people, and you are not the right person. You can be the right person to create the overall structure and the plan and the system, but you are not the right person to answer every question. And as long as you know where to ask, you can get there. And then the idea came from there, and then we start to build the team and then collaborate with different coaches from a lot of different fields and continue to do that. And I think that the idea behind the training plan initially was like, hey, is it possible to scale this experience so that those athletes who have the aspiration to do something big for themselves or in the sport, but they don't have access to that world-class team yet, they don't have those resources or the fame yet to be able to do that, can we create a scalable version of that? Can we take those lessons and deliver them online to more people? And that's kind of how I think about it. Can we have a world-class team for you, even if you are not yet a world-class athlete?
Right. Well, hey, I can relate to that. That's our whole thing, man. I love hearing that. So I'm curious, can you tell me a little bit about the evolution of getting everyone to work together and maybe how that's changed over the years? And if you need me to clarify, I definitely can.
Well, how I would think, if I understood it correctly, how I would say is like at the beginning, it was very much, I would say, I trust your work. I know what you're doing, and just you have free reign. Here's the kind of some constraints for you, and here is a free reign. And then I go through phases where I experiment with more specific stuff. So I might give the coach more constraints, or I might give them more freedom. And oftentimes I think that actually we as human beings do the best work when we have more constraints. So I try to guide the process, but I try not to determine the process.
Got it. So even today, are you telling, when you're creating the program for one of your athletes, are you just saying, at this point in the day, so-and-so weightlifting coach is going to have, their block of time with the athlete with these constraints, or are you looking at the entire program and looking at how they interact with each other and stuff like that? How in depth are y'all going with that?
Yeah, so I definitely see my role as coming up with the framework and the big picture, and then making sure that everything works together, that there's synergy between the components. So I'm not a big fan of let's throw some weightlifting, let's throw some gymnastics, let's do some sport specific stuff, let's do and nothing fits together and it doesn't make sense. It's not a program. It's like if you go online and you just pick up 4 different programs and you choose your favorite parts from each one of them. Like that's not a program. Like I think each training block we write or each chunk of programming is an experiment. It's a question, and we're really asking is, does this work for what we are trying to accomplish? And it changes a little bit each time, but it definitely always needs to fit together. But I'm thinking also of like, hey, has to be some independent components that work well regardless of the environment that you put them in. And that's where you kind of find those kind of more foundational, more principle-based things that you can build on long term. So I think some things work only in this context, but I'm kind of looking for what works in most contexts.
Gotcha. And then what's the method of experimentation? Obviously you want that core to stay consistent, but how do you experiment with new things, and how do you know when something's working and when it isn't?
Yeah, so I over the years, I think I've kind of come down to a certain structure where some things to me seem to just make sense in terms of, let's say, training frequency for things like weightlifting or strength, or, for CrossFit athletes, doing strength once a week, I think would be really hard to get stronger. I think that would be very challenging, for example. If you snatch only once a week, it's really hard to get good at something if you do it only rarely. I think that there's some kind of things that through experimentation and learning have kind of come together to create this framework of constraints that essentially kind of forces me to ask certain questions, like, given these constraints, how could I do X, Y, or Z? So I tend
for all you Americans, that's a Z that he just threw out there. Not the Z is a Z. When I heard when my wife told me that, I was like, what is a Z?
What is that?
Sorry to interrupt you, man. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I got this kind of mongrel Australian, Finnish, English, American English going on. So, so I think it's like, to create those constraints, I tend to try to have like a little 6-week block. I think 6 weeks is a reasonable time to make progress, but not so long that if we go in the wrong direction, that it's a disaster. And find points of course correction as often as possible. So I'd like to know something about my athletes weekly, at least every 2-3 weeks. So there's always something that they might not know is a test, but it's a test. Right. And I want to know what the reactions are, what the responses are to that. Sometimes I'm interested in the numbers. Sometimes I'm not interested in the numbers. I'm interested in the psychology of how they responded to something, how challenging, how hard it was for them, or how easy. Because some of those numbers in some of the work, they matter. What really matters is, did you put in the effort? Did you put in the work? So it's a combination of data collection, which is always imperfect. This is like the one area that's I feel like is always a struggle to track these multiple variables in a meaningful way, and say something about them. Together with looking at the kind of the qualitative information that the athletes are giving back to me, and all of this in a kind of framework of constraints where we're testing. We have different programs, so we're testing same components in different programs and see if those components kind of carry through, if they create the same adaptations in different environments, or if the adaptations are different, and then kind of learn from that and continue to hone and refine each of these little pieces.
That is awesome, man. What are some of the key differences in the way that you approach off-season, open, regionals, games prep periods? And let's say that I'm talking about a games athlete.
Yeah, I think the big thing is, like, once you compete at the games, great. Like, let's take some time off and let's get easily back into training. So let's actually I think what happens is that people go to the CrossFit Games and they either have the success that they want and they're hungry, or they don't and they're hungry. And then 2 days later, they're back at the gym and they're just smashed already. And they try to put in the work when their foundation is in pieces, basically. So
what is that? We talk about this a lot on here. Yeah. I wonder if you could go into some of the physiology about what that actually means. Like, what is actually trashed and what effects does that have long term?
Well, I think like there's some very simple things. So we track with some of our top athletes. We'll do hormone panels every day at the games just to see, just to learn. And we've been doing that for over the last 2 years, and we'll see things like, oh, your thyroid function goes down during the CrossFit Games. It's like, what a surprise! It turns out your cortisol goes through the roof, your testosterone goes down. But we try to look at also like a little bit more in the biochemistry and the pathways underlying that, and try to really learn like, oh, what could have we done differently? And I think the things you'll see is the reduced thyroid function, complete glycogen depletion, which is kind of like that's kind of fast to recover. You see the stress hormones and going up, testosterone going down, these very typical things. I think if you would look at neurotransmitter levels, I would expect to see that the neurotransmitter levels are low. It's hard to produce a lot of force when you don't have all these chemicals going through your brain. And I think that there's a component of psychological fatigue. And I think all of this is not just the games weekend, or the week. I think it's the preparation, it's the long season. You had to give a big push at the regionals. You get a little bit of recovery, but there's not so much time to rest because it's time to get back to work. And I think it's the season that you're recovering from. You can't think of it as recovering from 1 week. If you feel like at the end of the games that you can just go back into work, part of it is that maybe your preparation was insufficient and maybe you could have competed at a higher level than you did.
Right. Okay. So then going forward, just generally speaking, what's the difference in that off-season open regionals and then games prep?
Yeah, I think, the off season is really an opportunity to heal your wounds. So it's really an opportunity to do the work that you couldn't do when it's close to a competition. So I think as you get close to competition, the work gets more and more specific. Regionals, I think, is like the worst time of CrossFit athletes' lives because they have to keep repeating the same stuff because it's the only time of the year that we know what lies ahead, so we can make the training extremely specific. Whereas in the off season, we don't yet know what the challenges are going to be, except that obviously statistically speaking, we have some approximations of what it'll look like. But this is the time for us to do the non-specific work. It's to build a bigger base. It's to go and play other sports. It's to not to spend all the time at the gym. So I think it's really the goal is to develop movement skills that you don't develop at the gym, to build the foundation of doing just the kind of lifting and the kind of movement that even at the gym that you might not be able to do when you get closer to the open, when you have to be specific, or you get close to regionals or the games where you have to be specific in the preparation. So there's an element of fun in there that I think is really important and refreshing your mind. But then I think it's also the time to build the foundational movements that are not so specific. You don't have to squat 5 times a week. You can be pushing a prowler, pulling a sled, doing strongman stuff, etc. To build that foundation again.
That's awesome. What do you think? So there are only 80 individuals that qualify for the games every year, and then there are another 80,000 that want to make it to the games. What are the training considerations and differences in training needs of those that are already at that level and they have the training age to handle that kind of training, that kind of volume, and then the rest of the people? What are the differences that these folks need to be considering in terms of training, if any?
Yeah, I think they do. I think that the big thing comes first in terms of their identity. I think once you've been to CrossFit Games, or you've been to regionals, you have a different identity than you had before. There's that growth that kind of changes the nature of the work. I think you can bring in so much more intensity, so much more of that how you do things into your sessions once you kind of see yourself as a certain person. And I think there is this trend, and if you look at other sports, is that to a degree that the better you get at what you do, the less volume you can actually handle because the work gets so much harder and you get so much closer to expressing that true intensity than a beginner would. So I think that there has to be that really careful balance of, yes, you need more volume, but because you can lift heavier, you can go faster, you can go longer, you might need to also have that consideration that, hey, maybe you cannot handle as much. And I think the other thing really in that same point comes down to this idea of, overtraining versus under recovery kind of thing. And I think the better you get at the higher level, the more you have to make sure that you're not under recovering. And the more you need to be training at that kind of, I like this concept of maximum recoverable volume. It's like you have to find the edge at which your results start to go down, back off a little bit, work there as long as you can, deload when needed, and then continue. And that's really like if you want to get the most out of your training. Whereas someone else who might be more of a beginner, they might not yet be ready for that. They might need to be looking for that minimum effective dose if they have some other constraints in their daily life where they have full-time jobs, etc. So I think the big picture is, yes, you need to be able to build the volume over time, but you also will build the intensity over time. And the better an athlete you are in our sport, the higher an intensity you can express. And a lot of your training can no longer be at that highest intensity. So you have to start to be smart about when you choose to go hard in the week and when you choose to back off. Whereas a beginner can go pretty hard almost every day because their hard is not that hard at all yet. So it's a little roundabout answer. I think it's a big topic, but I think there's significant differences for sure, and a lot of considerations. You cannot train like the best athletes that you see if you are not there yet.
No, that's a phenomenal answer. One thing that stood out to me is that that perspective shift that you talked about, right? Once you make the games, your identity changes. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on, obviously, the 80,000 people that want to go to the games that haven't yet? They're going to want to figure out a way to adopt some of that without having been there to help them perform better. Do you have any strategies for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the two different ways to approach this. One is saying that, hey, if you put in the repetitions, you put in the work, that's going to increase your competency, and that competency is going to increase your confidence. And that's one way to build it up, for sure. Like, if you're not putting in the work, and that's going to eat away at who you feel like, who you are, your identity. I think there's a great book called Resilience by Eric Greitens, one of the big influences for me. And he talks about this idea of, most people go through their lives in this order. They have feelings that lead to actions that lead to identity. So their feelings might be, I'm tired today. Action is, I'm not going to go to the gym, or I'm going to just take it easy. And then the identity is, I can't make it. I'm a loser. I don't have what it takes. And I think that the other way to do this, and I think much better way, is to choose in the morning when you wake up, choose who you're going to be, take action accordingly. And then you're going to have the feelings that you want to have. You're going to feel confident. You're going to feel like you can get where you are. And that creates a great cycle and loop for you to every day to just keep building on that identity. And I think the best way to become something you're not yet is to pretend you are already there and just think, what would that person do? What would Rich Frowning do today in training? How would they tackle this workout? How would Annie do it? How would Catherine do it? How would these top names, how would Matt Fraser tackle this workout today? Would he give 50% or would he give his all? And I think that modeling excellence is oftentimes a great way to build an identity that you don't yet have.
Fuck yeah. That is fucking awesome. I love that, man. And for everyone listening, the loop goes the same way. You're starting it at a different point and you're taking charge. One thing that I think I've spoken about on here and definitely with our athletes is something I call thought hacking, and it's out of the book Self-Coaching 101, and it has a similar kind of model, right? You have a circumstance that happens to you, you have a thought, an emotion, a behavior, and then a result. And if you want a certain result out of your life, then you can reverse engineer it to say, what thought or belief do I need to have that chain reaction leading to that end result that I want? So same kind of thing you're thinking about, man. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you have that clear vision, you've set the clear goal, you have a clear vision of who you want to be, then exactly you have to decide, well, how would this person think? What kind of identity would they have? How would they act in this case? What would they eat? And getting into the habit of doing that as often as you remember, I think is really the pathway to building yourself to be who you want to become.
Wow, that's powerful. Do you have any other strategies that you use with your athletes to coach on mindset or mental prep?
I really like, there's this idea, 10-minute mental toughness. Trying to rack my brain to remember the name of the author. I'll get it for you. But this idea of, when you build mental toughness, it's not something that you do 2 weeks before a competition. Right. It's really something that you do every day. It's a mindset, it's a choice. And, the simple tools that we use, for example, is once you finish your training session, let's go back. before you start your training session, go to the gym with an intent. Know what you want to accomplish. That could be numbers, that could be effort, that could be certain mindset that you want to maintain, and go there with a purpose. Don't just show up. I think that's not enough. That's enough if you want to be fit, but if you want to be the best in the world, that's just not sufficient. You have to go in with a goal. Now, you go through your session, and then at the end of the session, just ask yourself a couple simple questions. Just ask, what are the 3 things that I'm proud of? What you did well, based on those goals that you set. Always keep it in context so you're making progress. You're not just doing some work. And then ask yourself, what am I not happy about? What didn't go as well? What could I have done better? Frame it in a way that is empowering for you. And then really just think, okay, what's the one thing that I could do? So I think a lot of times what happens is that athletes are so good at finding stuff that they suck at, that at the end of the session, they're like, well, this didn't go well, and this didn't go well, and this didn't go well. And they kind of drown themselves into that loop of, okay, I feel like this, the actions, and then the identity. But rather go, okay, here's 3 things I'm proud of. Here's one thing I need to get better at. Here's one way I can get better at that. And take the responsibility for that process and take the ownership. I don't think it should be the coach. The coach might ask the questions, but the athlete is the one who should come up with the answers.
That's phenomenal. The marketer Seth Godin?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Seth Godin says that we as humans, we get so good at tracking the wrong things. We track all of the things that we suck at. And it's such a powerful tool, what you just described, as an athlete, but also as a human being, to perform better or to, have more gratitude, whatever it may be. If you simply shift your focus to what's going right. And also, definitely keep in mind what you can improve on, but always keep in mind the things that are going right and the things that you can be proud of, because that's going to have a tremendous impact on the actions you take, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at all of this, I think that sports is just a great metaphor and great opportunity for us to learn how to be better humans, but it's no different at all. It's like if you're a business owner, you're a gym owner, you're not a competitive athlete, just ask yourself those questions at the end of the day, right? What 3 things am I proud of? What did I do well for my athletes, for my clients? And then what could I have done better? And then how am I going to do it? I think it's the same process for everyone.
Love it, man. You have any considerations that you take into account for older athletes, especially with the, masters continuing to grow?
Yeah, we've been kind of for many years now, it's kind of saying that, hey, movement is our foundation. And I believe in that in a lot of different levels. But I think especially that the longer it took you before you found this sport, the older you were when you started, the more bad habits, or within the sport, the more bad habits you've had time to accumulate, and the more your tissues will tell the story of those bad habits. So I think it's like you have the body that you've earned by the way that you move. It's a good quote, and I think it's like a lot of the masters athletes will come in with a lot of significant baggage of different things that they've done in their lives, from the ways that they trained, the way that they worked, and I think that's a big consideration. Just to help athletes move better. I think a lot of the masters athletes, they're already so powerful, so strong, they're so endurance. It's like amazing to watch at the CrossFit Games, but I think that there's a lot of opportunity in the quality of the movement. And it's a great opportunity for them, again, from that growth perspective, because now all of a sudden, you might be 50 years old and you run your own company, you've been running it for a long time, and now you can get coaching on how to do something very fundamental better. So you kind of re-engage with that learning and with that growth mindset. So I think that movement is a great place to start.
That's a great answer. So I deal with something, we, at Brute, we deal with this a lot, and Barbell Shrug calls it the shiny object syndrome. And this is where you have an athlete that's on a some kind of system, a program, and they see something on Instagram that one of their competitors is doing, and they just have to try it, right? So my question is, do you deal with that? And if so, how do you go about, how do you deal with that kind of situation?
I only deal with it every single day. I think that, kind of more fundamental. Yeah. Oh dear. Fundamentally, I think that we as human beings, Stephen Pressfield's work, like talking about hierarchical existence or kind of territorial existence kind of this idea. We tend to compare ourselves just by nature of things. We tend to compare ourselves to others. And I think Instagram and social media is kind of heaven and hell for that at the same time. It's like it can inspire you and it can teach you, oh, that's possible. Oh, we can run a 4-minute mile, or we can jump over the Great Wall of China with a skateboard. Or it can be, oh my God, they can do this and I can't do that, so I must not be a worthy human being. And I think that that comparison is really killing us. And I think it takes away from the focus on what really matters, which is you and the work that you're putting in on your journey. It's not someone else's journey that you should compare yourself to, but it should be, who am I today compared to who I was yesterday? Am I making progress? And then use those other people's videos and social media posts as an inspiration to what could be. But I think if you chase that program, I think we want to have that one silver bullet program that's going to get us there. But I think the truth is that if you're doing approximately the right things and you have a guide who's willing to help you, I think how you do things and then the why you do things so that you can push hard when it's hard. I think those things matter more. There is no one program that anyone should follow. It's approximations.
You're right.
Of
there
what
are
we
two.
think
It's
is the
brute
best.
strength and the training plan.
Exactly. I didn't want to say that out loud, but now that you put it out there. But
No,
you know
going.
what I mean. I think people get caught up in, okay, what is the program? And I think people need to find the thing that works for them. They need to find the approach that works for them. I think there's a lot of people doing really good work in our field, and I think everyone has their own flavor. Otherwise, we should just have one program if everyone's doing the same thing. And finding that path and then following that path and just steer away from distractions. I think when you chase too many things at the same time, you're not making any progress anywhere. It is so easy to get lost. I get like ranty about this topic because I think it's such a funny one. I'd say, there's a website called zenpencils.com, which is a great website. And I recommend every athlete to go there and they have a little search bar. You put in Krishnamurti and you look at this little comic about how comparing ourselves to others kills who we really are. That's something I send to my athletes all the time. It's an easy read and deep philosophy, and it really makes you think of how you lived your life through this comparison until now and how you can change it.
Can you say that one more time and then we'll link that in the show notes?
Oh, for sure. So the website is called zenpencils.com, and it's basically this collection of these philosophical quotes, but they've made into cartoons. And the person's name is Krishnamurti. He's an old yogi philosopher. Jiddu Krishnamurti. Don't compare yourself to others.
Awesome.
Highly recommended.
Hell yeah. I can't wait to check that out. Now, do you ever find yourself, so you have your philosophy on that and your stand on that. Do you ever find yourself wanting to or actually sacrificing in your programming a little bit of what people need to give them what they want in those terms?
Yeah, I think that's always the struggle of any kind of guide is you have to give people enough of what they think they need or what they want so that they will put in the work that they really need. Because otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to lose them and you're going to lose the opportunity to help them. So I think there has to be some tactical and strategic choices. Although I think it's kind of our role as coaches and in a form storytellers of the athlete's story is to make it an exciting one, Like I think there is a certain amount of boring work and you have to fall in love with boredom to a degree to be truly great because that's a rare skill that most people won't develop. So it gives you an edge. But I think, you also have to be able to enjoy. And I think, as human beings, we seek novelty and it's very important for us. So we need to be able to find ways to provide that novelty within the constraints of our program. So give them what they need in disguise of what they want. Right. I think that's the challenge and the struggle, and it's not easy and it's never perfect.
Right. That is for sure an art with all of these different modalities.
Oh yeah.
How do you teach technical movements like the snatch and muscle up in a remote setting?
I think that's a challenge. I think it really is a challenge. I think it sometimes is the work of producing, things like video content, right, is a simple way to do it. This is an area where I always feel imperfect. where I feel like we have some good resources and we need to develop more. I think in person is really so valuable. So I kind of promote this idea for athletes is to work with us, let us be your guide, but at the same time, work with a coach, work with someone in person, if you can, because that hands-on is just irreplaceable.
Right.
And I think that, nowadays that the problem is not the information in a sense, like the information is out there in the world. You can go to internet and figure out how to do a muscle up or a handstand push up or handstand walk if you know how to use Google, right? The information is out there. I think what's difficult is the curation of that knowledge, deciding who is worth listening to. And then even harder than that, than knowing what to do, is to doing what you know. I think it's actually putting in the work. So we tend to focus a lot on encouraging people to do the work, and there's all different ways to master the process, to how to progress a movement. But I think it's not that it's less important, but I think it's been done. I think what's really matters is to get the people to put in the work.
Right. I have a couple more questions for you before we wrap it up.
For sure.
What has been the biggest thing that you've learned over the past year or two as a coach?
Oh, man. This is a long book of things. I think I've really kind of tried to focus on that it's the journey of an athlete. It's not my journey. I think that's something to always remember as a coach, and I want to keep reminding myself of, is that, the work is being done for the athletes. So not to get so wrapped up in how I think things should be or how things are, but to kind of try to understand things from their perspective and then find the right solutions that fit their way of seeing the world. I think that's been something that I've been working more on, And then the other thing I think is really this shift of, hey, I might have thought that I had some answers, but now I really think that I have questions. And I think what keeps us going as coaches and keep developing the sport and ourselves and our athletes is really say, okay, I have some answers, but more importantly, I know how to ask questions and I know what meaningful questions look like. And the day that I think I have all the answers, then I've lost the plot. And I think really maintain that humility and staying humble and being a student all the time is something that's kind of like more and more what drives me daily.
That's phenomenal. How did you come upon this kind of belief that it's more the athlete's journey, and that absolutely resonates, and I understand it. How did that come to be so significant to you?
I think it's like, I think a lot of coaches, it would be easy as a coach, let's put it this way. It would be easy as a coach to think that you're Luke Skywalker when your role is to be Yoda or Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I think if people to a degree, we look up to athletes and there's some charisma and charm in there, and we kind of want to associate ourselves with those people. But I think ultimately we are all just looking to go through our own journey, and we are not looking for more heroes. In a sense, we are looking for more guides so that we can be the hero. And I think that's really this idea of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, etc. I think that's what's really brought it into my awareness and made me think about it more so. And then also having experiences with people like Tony Robbins and Jim Rohn, etc., and learning from these good athletes, good coaches, learning from John Wooden, his readings, etc. I think that they have always done this. I think they've always put the other person, put the client, put the athlete first, and make it about their journey and not about ours.
Amen, man. So looking back on your career so far, I think you've been coaching Annie for 6 years. Of what are you most proud of?
I could give a very specific anecdotal story. This was years ago already, but I remember being at the time at the level 1 CrossFit HQ staff and teaching a course in Argentina after CrossFit Games, and meeting one of the team members who told that his daughter had a poster of Annie on her wall, and she was looking up to her as a role model rather than some skinny model somewhere. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was like, this is why I do it. It's not just the journey of the athletes, but it's what they can inspire in others. It goes back to what we talked about learning. I think that people sometimes, they just need to be inspired so that they take that first step on the journey. And I think that's where you can have an impact. And I think that's like a small anecdotal piece of what I think is the most significant. It's if we can help these athletes to become something that they think they can be, and then they can inspire other people to start on that journey. Now, there's a triple effect that's not just about you, it's not just about the athlete, it's not just about the sport, but it's about something bigger. And that's kind of what makes me proud of working with the athletes that I work with.
Well, man, this community is so lucky to have someone like you in it. This has been phenomenal. Again, I'm so grateful for your time. Where can people find out more about you and keep up with you on social media?
Oh yeah, thanks. It's hard to keep up with me on social media because I'm terrible at social media, but I do have Instagram, Jami Tikkanen, very easy to find. Our website is the trainingplan.co, so there's no M in the end, so just .co, and they can find out more about what we offer to athletes in there.
Awesome, brother. Thanks again, man. You have a great night.
Thank you. You too.